This is The Political View. Welcome. As the country prepares for its fifth general elections, activist and author Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh has launched an innovative WhatsApp channel experience in a bid to change the coverage and its narrative, reflecting more the youth agenda. He joins us now in studio. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us, Sizwe. Is that an apt description of what it is that you're trying to achieve, by the way?
Absolutely. It's so wonderful to be with you, and this is South Africa's first WhatsApp news channel. It's a new innovation, and it's a way of getting news and information about this election into the hands of the very important people who not only are currently inheriting our democracy, but who will go forward and inherit it in the future as well. And so,
were you inspired by the use of social media in other elections and its impact on how it has not only rallied people around certain issues, but raising others?
I think so. We've seen across the continent, in fact, the way that digital channels are starting to affect politics more widely as social media becomes more ubiquitous. But nobody's really cracked WhatsApp. Twitter, Facebook are really popular channels, but the most popular by far in South Africa is WhatsApp. And harnessing how deeply WhatsApp is spread in our country, especially among young people, is a crucial way to actually reach people where they are.
So I'm curious, WhatsApp, how are you going to do that?
So what you do is you simply click a link, which is available on all of my social media channels, Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, and it takes you into what's called the Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh experience. And it's essentially a one-on-one conversation where I send you the latest news from the day, 1-minute news clips at the end of the evening, interviews that I do with various people from a young person's perspective about the election, and really put the information you need in your hands. And I'm having that conversation. We started on Sunday already with about 8,000 people.
And that's growing. What I was going to ask you. How do you manage that? How are you going to manage the traffic once it starts to grow exponentially?
We've been overwhelmed, and we feel really happy with just how quickly it's growing. But we are harnessing the power of artificial intelligence. So when we send messages to the entire network, we're able to draft them in advance. And then we can engage one-on-one with people who respond via comments. And so far it's been working wonderfully smoothly. But the beauty of new innovations and new ideas is you never know what's coming around the corner the next day, and we're just caught in this wonderful, exciting moment as our election unfolds.
So you also say that it'll provide analysis and interviews, and I'm wondering, how are you going to cherry pick that? Because part of the problem, according to some, has been that the analysis, has been the interviews, in the sense that there has been an exclusion of spaces by and of certain people.
Well, that's partly why we started this channel. We think in general young voices and the voices of South Africa's youth are being excluded and marginalized and not given the platform they need. So we have an unapologetic bias for youth and young people, but we've also ensured that with this election we have equal representation of all the political parties, as well as equal gender representation.
How do you define your equal, by the way?
By equal we mean that, for example, the ANC, the DA and the EFF will be given equal representation on the channel, but we're also going to be speaking to most of the leaders from the major parties. I think what we really want to do is give young people a cross-section of the political options that are available to them. But the channel isn't just about political parties. It's also about comedians, it's about rappers, it's about
I must ask you this one thing that's going to grate you, because I'm sure that you've been asked before, and there's a reason I ask, what would you use as your litmus test for equal? People are going to say, but isn't it because your father is so-and-so, won't you be a little bit more biased towards EFF or EFF politics?
Sure.
And I know you're a young man with his own mind, with his own career, but how do you respond to that question? Because it is in some viewers' minds out there.
Sure, look, it's a perfectly fair question. I think the first conclusion people jump to, especially in a patriarchal society, is who's the most powerful man in your life, and you must be serving his agenda. You know, my mother is also a very astute and adroit political figure, and no one ever asks me if I'm pursuing my mother's agenda. Look, I'm doing a PhD at Oxford. I have my own views, and I care deeply about this country. And I'm not here to serve anyone's agenda, but the views of young South Africans. And
so let's talk about young South Africans. Are they a monolithic group? Do they have the same ideals? Do they have the same objectives, just in terms of the conversation that we're having ahead of the elections?
I don't think so, and I don't think they need to be treated as monolithic, nor do I think that we need to pretend with this channel that we're speaking for young people. All we're trying to do is speak to young people. We're trying to put young people on platforms, we're trying to hear their ideas, we're trying to profile the voices and the views of young people. And it's impossible to capture that in its full diversity. But what we should and can start to do is start to capture it.
And you are very clear from the beginning, saying that you have your own views. For instance, that you're pro-land reform, that you're deeply opposed to racism. So you are very comfortable that that is the perspective of young people that you're going to be putting out there, and you're unapologetic about it.
Well, I'm unapologetic that those are the issues that I care about. I don't think people should look at this channel and think we're trying to take a God's eye view and provide this, quote, objective news. We're coming from a perspective, we abhor racism, we abhor gender discrimination, and we care about uplifting young people's voices. And we think that can add diversity to the media spectrum, and people should take what we say from that perspective and sample that with other forms of news that they have to get a full perspective of our country.
I mean, you've written a book about the misconceptions about the youth in this country, and as you say, you're already undertaking your doctoral studies. What are your thoughts about the apathy, especially in South African youth? We've seen that there was quite a major drop in the last general elections in 2014. And there's also quite a split amongst the age groups. I think it's 18 to 26, and they're up. So what do you think? What do you think are the differences? What is the great divide? Is it non-responsiveness of government? Is it lack of platforms? What is it?
In my view, it's the fact that young people care about our country, they care about politics, they care about the issues that affect them, but nobody's actually serving them content that comes from their perspective. So you always feel like you're on the outside looking in when you consume news or when you consume political information. And so I think a key part of that puzzle is actually presenting public information to young people, by young people, for young people. And it's no wonder if we don't have that young people aren't excited by the content. And that's partly why we created this channel, to excite them. But some
studies also say that because young people are just tired of being led by what they view as corrupt politicians who don't do anything for them. And if they promise them one thing, then they just simply are not delivering. But I'm also curious about this narrative that you speak about, that you say will be representative of young people, and that also is diverse. There's an urban, there's a rural bias, there's a different narrative from somebody who goes to a TVET college who's much older, somebody who goes to a higher education institution. That's going to be quite a tough call.
It is, and as I say, we're not trying to be everything to everyone. We're simply just trying to be an additional perspective, which happens to be a youth perspective. But the point you make about accessibility is crucial. That's why we're on WhatsApp, because almost 50% of Southern Africa's internet data goes through WhatsApp, so it's the most widely accessible. But we've also translated the channel first into isiXhosa, and we have plans to translate the channel into every language to try to overcome the language barrier, which I think is another key reason why many people feel their voices aren't being represented in the diversity of South Africa's media landscape.
Let's talk about the broader issue of inequality in this country, and that I think also drills down to political education. If the curricula at schools is such as it has been over the past couple of decades, then very few young people would know whom to identify with other than the sentimentality vote. So share your thoughts around that, what you're going to be positing to them, or, you know, even to spark conversation.
Well, what we want to do is put the people who happen to wield power in our country, as well as the young South Africans who are aspiring to that power, under the microscope and ask them what their views are, and try to ascertain from them what it is that they think should be happening in this country.
What are your views?
At the same time, well, I mean, I've written a book expressing my views.
Yeah, but just for somebody who hasn't had the benefit of...
Sure, but I mean, the channel isn't necessarily just about my views. It's about harnessing the views of many young people. And it's also not simply about me trying to shove those views down other people's throats. have written about land.
I just mean your general
musings
about where we are, just on some of those issues. The economy, and you mentioned the issue of making it aesthetically more appealing to young people. Just share some of just your thoughts of going into this election, because people would like to know the face behind this platform as well.
I think the most important view I can share with you in terms of how we are trying to attract young people is both that the content needs to be informative and extremely well researched, which I think we can bring to bear, but it also needs to look really good. And so what we've tried to do with the channel and with the visuals is excite young people. And this goes back to what we were saying earlier. Why are young people apathetic? Well, part of the reason is they're getting served so many messages per day from brands, from commercial entities, that the political messages aren't keeping up just from an aesthetic beauty perspective. And so we think if we can include the issues they care about, but package it in a way that is chic and clean and bright, then we will excite the youth imagination in this election.
Do you think that young people feel that they have access enough, just in terms of the platforms, to democracy or even policy influencing platforms?
I think there's widespread feeling, certainly from the people who speak on our channel, that there are very few ways that a young person in South Africa can have their voices heard. And part of the reason is, if we're constantly begging channels or brands or political parties to take us seriously and we don't have our own platform, then we'll forever be going around with our begging bowl. I think what's necessary for young South Africans is to have a media platform that brings power to bear on the table. And once that's there and young people's voices are harnessed...
And that is not reliant on the various media houses to give them a voice, so to speak.
And then we can say, listen, you either come on this channel or we don't take your voice seriously, and you turn the table in that way. Now, of course, that's a much wider project, but it's part of what we believe we've started, and we want to inspire. And so the view is, don't hate, replicate. If you look at what we're doing and you think you can make it better, start your own channel, and let's build a network of young voices.
Just a quick and final one. Do you think the fees must fall, #FeesMustFall movement led us to this particular point?
I think the Fees Must Fall movement was a crucial moment where we saw how the voices of young people could be harnessed for some kind of progressive change. But of course, the question is, how is that moment going to sustain itself? And I think a key part of that is building media platforms, media channels, where that view can be constantly expressed, as opposed to simply on one issue or another.
So build on the benefits, or rather the victories of that. So just to repeat again, so you've got 8,000 subscribers now, and
bear in mind it's day 9.
Yes. So tell us a little bit more. For those who didn't have the benefit earlier on, how do they get on the platform?
Sure.
And how much will it cost, by the way, if at all?
Sure. On any of my social media channels, which is Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, you can find a link, or hopefully someone has shared it in your family WhatsApp group already. You click on the link and you go through to the news channel and you follow the prompts from there. We found young people find it quite easy, so just click the link. And, you know, we've been overwhelmed. We had no idea what was going to happen. And to have got 8,000 people in almost as many days shows that this channel is building a momentum.
Cost?
That of its own. In terms of the costs, there's a data cost, which we're starting to work on with providers, and that's it. Other than that, it's a completely free news channel that anyone can access at any time.
All right, thank you so much for that. That is Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, and this has been The Political View.